Stanley is a 1972 snakesploitation film and one of the crowning achievements of its home studio, Crown International Pictures. Directed by William Grefé, Stanley stars Chris Robinson, Alex Rocco, Steve Alamo, and Stanley as himself. Somewhere in the Everglades, Tim Ochoa is a soldier home from the Vietnam War, grieving his father's death and finding it difficult to relate to people. He has a stronger bond with nature and supports himself by rounding up snakes for people who need to milk their venom for research or dance with them in their nightclub act. Tim becomes protective of the snakes, including Stanley, who has a wife and 3 kids and shares dinner with Tim from time to time. Tompkins, a greedy manufacturer of snakeskin clothes, wants all of Tim's friends for his product line, and he's willing to harm everyone Tim cares about to get what he wants. Tim's pushed too far, and he sends Stanley and his slithering friends out for vengeance. It's no accident that Stanley bears some similarities to Willard, a 1971 horror film and surprise hit about a man who trains an army of rats to attack on his behalf. Director William Grefé read about Willard's box office success in one of the Hollywood trade papers. He dreamed up a story that switched out rats for snakes and pitched it to Crown CEO Red Jacobs, who gave him $125,000 to deliver his snake movie in 5 months. Production began on December 1st, 1971 in Grefé's home state of Florida. Alex Rocco happened to be in Florida to film scenes in Miami for Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather. Grefé let Paramount pay for Rocco's travel and board, and filmed Rocco's scenes for Stanley on his off days. The film completed principal photography by Christmas and was released as scheduled in April 1972. Stanley fits in the animal attack genre, but it's not the typical force of nature storyline like The Birds or Night of the Lepus. Like its inspiration, Stanley is a riff on the Misfits' revenge story with the cast-off man who gets pushed too far and lashes out at those who tortured him, but instead of a machete or chainsaw, he's weaponized nature against his enemies. One ingredient that Stanley adds to the formula is a couple of sprinkles of social commentary. In one conversation alone, the film manages to shoehorn environmentalism, institutional racism, the eradication of Native American tribes, and Vietnam as part of Tim's backstory. It doesn't really explore any of those themes, but it's 1972, so social consciousness is just going to happen. The movie has some hissable villains, particularly Alex Rocco as the sleazy factory owner, but the movie really hangs on the performance of Chris Robinson as Tim, and he's honestly pretty good, especially at keeping the character in a place where he could either be the hero or the villain. Maybe the biggest flaw is that the movie goes on 20 minutes longer than it should. A last-minute romantic subplot gets tacked on to help build to an ending that goes bigger and echoes Willard's ending, but doesn't quite hit the spot. Stats for the sickos. Starting after minute 54, this movie has 7 human kills, and yes, most of them are by snakebite. These are PG-rated kills, though, nothing really gory. If you have a phobia for snakes, however, these scenes might activate it. On the other hand, if you're not ready to witness animal cruelty, you should definitely fast forward past the scene starting at minute 62, when the killer in sunglasses finds Hazel and the baby snakes in their crib. It's graphic, and there's every reason to believe those are real snake deaths caught on film. Yes, that's hypocritical for a film with the message that snakes are more noble than people, but this is from a director that revealed in a DVD commentary that the original Stanley became a wallet that he carries around to this day. Anyway, if you think the sight of Stanley carrying a water canteen to Tim is adorable, skip to minute 65. Stanley was a reunion for Grefé and Steve Alamo, who had played the lead in Wild Rebels, released for Crown International. Alamo also produced the 2 songs featured in Stanley, which were performed by John Vino. Stanley was also a feather in the cap for producer John Burroughs, who had previously shepherded such profitable Crown films as Young Graduates and Wild Riders. Marcia Knight played the dancer that buys snakes for her nightclub act. In 1963, she had played the femme fatale in The Skydivers. Gary Crutcher wrote the screenplay and played the scientist that pays for rattler venom. Crutcher delivered the script to Grefé in one 48-hour stretch. Grefé would tap Crutcher to write their next movie together, Super Chick. That's a story for another episode. Chris Robinson was new to Crown Pictures, but he was a familiar face to 60s TV audiences. He was a consistent day player and was part of the cast of the TV series 12 O'Clock High. He also became a regular on the daytime soaps General Hospital and The Bold and the Beautiful, which led to him being cast in a Vicks cough syrup campaign where he sold the memorable line,
"I'm not a doctor, but I play one on TV."
Stanley would be Crown's biggest hit ever, big enough for Grefé to suggest a sequel to the studio. But Mark Tenser, vice president at Crown, nixed the idea, saying no one makes money from sequels. Incidentally, the sequel to Willard, Ben, also was released in the summer of 1972. Grefé would spin the vengeful animal lover tale again, trading out snakes for a shark with 1976's Mako, The Jaws of Death. Meanwhile, producer John Burroughs would produce Kiss of the Tarantula, also released in 1976, this time with a disgruntled teenager and her pet, Tarantula. Stanley is the kind of exploitation movies that fans of the genre look for. It's both serious and mindless. It's both grounded and outrageous, and it's fashioned by veteran craftsmen of the genre. Stanley's now in the public domain, but if you can hunt it down, Code Red DVD published a 2011 special edition of Stanley with a director's commentary, where Grefé shares stories about the production of the film that may entertain you as much as the film itself.